I've joined the Rawvolution at NatuRaw because I know that not all raw food is created equal. I'm passionate about feeding dogs as nature intended. After all, you are what you eat, and so is your dog. At NatuRaw, there are no compromises, no confusion, just real raw food made with integrity and a conscience, offering 100% transparency, supporting British farmers, and only using the highest welfare assured ingredients is so important. They're a certified B Corp and reduce their carbon footprint by utilizing solar power and planting trees. They only use completely plastic-free packaging that's home compostable. Prudence and Mr. Binks are simply loving their nutrient-dense and balanced recipes. So try NatuRaw today. Just go to naturaw.co.uk and grab 20% off your first purchase with my code AnnaWebb20. Join the Rawvolution and feed exceptional raw food. Hello, I'm Anna Webb and welcome to A Dog's Life. This week we're talking to Dr. Caroline Allen about the Pet Lighthouse. And as ever, this episode is powered by Antonol and fueled by NatuRaw. Dr. Caroline Allen, welcome to A Dog's Life.
Hi, Anna. Thanks very much for having me. Delighted to be here.
Well, I'm so delighted because we hooked up after not having seen each other since about 2008 to about last November when we were both in the House of Lords.
That's right. Yes. Yep.
At the Innate Health Assessment launch, actually, which was really good. Everyone had dressed up.
I know, it was really exciting. I think, there's been a certain amount of controversy around it, but I think that the more that we discuss and debate, these important issues around animal welfare and extreme breeding and conformation, will really move forward. And, sadly, that was the reason why you didn't see me after 2008, because I left general practice because I was struggling with, with having to patch up animals who were fundamentally a little bit broken because of their breeding. And that's, that is very difficult for vets to see.
No, I do. Absolutely. I totally understand all of that. But, going back to 2008, I've seen a lot of vets in the last nearly 30 years as a grown up living on my own with my own dogs. And obviously prior to that, our own family dogs. And in that time, I will have to say there have been 3 vets that have stood out. And one of those, Caroline, is you. So when we did meet again, and I think we'd met at one of the RSPCA awards prior, actually, in this time, because you, of course, went on to be the head vet at the RSPCA for over a decade.
Yeah, so after I left practice, I was very lucky to go and work for the RSPCA, and I was the chief vet for 8 years, which was, really an amazing experience and gave me, really a deeper insight into animal welfare. Sounds a bit of a strange thing to say as a vet, but there's a lot more to animal welfare than just health, and that's what I'm now sort of focusing on with the launch of my new business, Pet Lighthouse.
Yes. So would you say, Caroline, that the art of listening could be one of the factors behind the launch of Pet Lighthouse?
Yeah, so I think what really inspired me to create Pet Lighthouse was seeing that owners were struggling when they were faced with difficult decisions about their pet's healthcare or just a challenging journey with their pet. A lot of different options, many more options than were available than I qualified. Sadly, changes in the industry that have one way or another resulted in a loss of trust in some situations. and also seeing people going onto social media and actually asking questions that I personally think they should be asking of qualified vets, but asking them of unqualified people, and sadly, often getting really, really bad advice. So I want to create a safe, supportive space where people can come if they're sort of confused, seeking a second opinion, and just need time and space. And almost I'd describe it as a vet friend. You'd have a friend who was a vet and you'd go, can you just help me? But yeah, so it's a sort of professional vet friend, if you like.
Yeah, no, I love that, because you're right. I mean, I do think, looking back in 2008 to now, I've seen the vet profession change hugely. I mean, there's lots of things that I find at the moment a bit tricky. One of the things is it's very hard to see the same vet twice in a row. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it is coming up a lot during my consultations, is that lack of continuity. And it isn't ideal. I mean, I think, the vets will always be trying to write good notes so that you can have follow up, but it is so much better if you can actually have a relationship with your vet, because
Yeah.
having that relationship, understanding the pet's personality, the owner's personality, really helps as a vet for you to shape the appropriate course of diagnostics or treatment for that team. Animals are individuals, people are individuals, and we really need to remember that it can't be one size fits all, one protocol fits all.
Yeah, and that's sort of the feeling I've got at the minute. Now, whether that's because difference in vet school, I mean, vets have obviously got younger as I've got older.
Yeah.
Which I suppose is a bit of a conundrum. And I think a lot of technology now that we've got that we didn't have then, like WhatsApp, for example, is being used quite a lot to communicate about your pet, which, don't know, it's probably my age. I just find that it's a bit easy, isn't it? Just to ping over lots of WhatsApp messages, but you're not really having a face-to-face, well, you're not having a face-to-face conversation where you can look someone in the eye.
I mean, I think it has to come down to choice. For some people, and I'm sure some of the younger pet owners, that WhatsApp is just very much how they live their lives, and that's what they want. But obviously, if you do want that space to really have the conversation, and as you say, look people in the eye, build that relationship, then you hopefully the vets will be facilitating that. You talked about new technology. I think that's also a really good point when we actually think about changes in the profession, because from when we were probably you were a client of mine in 2008 through to now, what has really changed is what is actually available as well. So it is, I think, tougher for vets because they can do more and they can offer more, and they have been trained to offer more, and they feel to be a good vet you should offer more. And often the client wants that, but not always. And so I think you've still got the same length of consultation. Maybe the consultations are slightly longer, but there's a lot more different options to discuss. When I first qualified, it was or there's a steroid, or there's I joke a little bit, but not that much. Now there are many more options.
True, but often with these diagnostics that can be very costly, you sort of are going to do something, but then, for example, Prudence has a lump, okay? And one vet said, we've got to take a sample, we've got to take a sample. Another vet said, there's nothing wrong with that lump. She's 11. You expect dogs to have an odd lump here and there, it's not unusual. From my school of learning, the College of Integrated Veterinary Therapies, poking around the lump can make something that's benign be not benign. Or, with a lump as well, even if it is a cancerous lump, you might take the sample out of the bit that isn't cancerous. So you get a good biopsy back, the lump's fine, when in fact actually it's not fine. So in a way, maybe leave these things alone, knowing something like that. How's it going to, it's not going to prolong the life of your dog particularly?
Well, I
Perhaps.
think it could. And I think this is where that communication and relationship is really important, because there will be some people, and I'd probably class myself in this, who actually something appears and they really want to know what it is, and they just want as much as they can to understand what's going on. That is helpful for them. It's kind of calming. And as a general rule, I would recommend testing lumps. A lot of them are benign, but there can be, like, sort of, we call them the great pretender, like things like mast cell tumors that can look like they're nothing to worry about. But, Anna, you're saying Prudence is 11. I don't think I'd probably want to do surgery anyway. Then maybe you wouldn't check that lump. So for me, the golden rule about diagnostics is this going to change what I'm going to do?
Yeah,
And
I like that.
if it doesn't, then, that's not somewhere that I would be, spending my money or putting for the pet for a procedure. There are risks with some lumps that you could kind of seed tumor cells if it's a tumor, but generally taking an aspirate is actually really very safe, and particularly for skin lumps, is usually, for the worrying ones, it's usually pretty diagnostic. If there's worrying cells there, you'll often get them. So, but it's about that communication. It's about having the time and space to actually say, with every procedure, every treatment, there are risks or costs and there are benefits. And it's always about how you weigh those up.
Yes, no, absolutely. There is that thing, I was talking to someone at Crufts, won't name them, about, teeth. Teeth are an issue I know that crop up quite a lot. I mean, we've just actually done a consult, which I've so enjoyed, about Baggy, my cat, and his teeth did crop up. And I do agree, they probably do need looking at. And at that time, I may be interested in chopping off his testicles at the same time, only as we were discussing the greater picture of him ending up in a punch up, that he might come off the worse for wear, or getting hit by a car and these things. I mean, that's not so bad here due to the situation of my flat, which I bought on purpose for this. However, you never know, do you? And he's a black cat and he's very small, so he could get run over.
Yeah, again, it is about, there are good reasons why you haven't had him neutered. He came to you, he was very, very poorly. But again, it's about thinking about, what are the benefits of this? What are the risks? And actually, we discussed it with modern anesthetics. Even in an older pet, this should be really, really very safe. And obviously, the risks we know with the male cats would be, wanting to have a bigger territory, roaming further, getting into the fights. But coming back to where we started with dentistry, I do think that is such an important kind of area of health. Obviously, it's not always easy to look in our pets' mouths, so people often don't. And I think that probably kind of acknowledged, untreated dental problems are one of the biggest kind of animal welfare problems that we see in the pet population, because you know what it's like when you have a sore tooth.
Oh
And
no,
I think
yeah.
there are a lot of pets out there with sore teeth. So I myself have got a lurcher, which I love because they've got really good kind of innate health. They look like dogs should look, but we know that sighthounds do get tooth problems. So I'm really really working hard to be able to clean Jess's teeth, which, you have to start gradually, but that's one of those preventative things that I think is really, really beneficial to do. But you obviously have to start quite early before the problems develop.
Yes, I know, training the teeth thing. And I think dogs over time can get actually fed up. I've discovered this finger glove product, actually, Caroline. I haven't told you about it. I absolutely love it. And it's because toothbrushes, after a while, they see the toothbrush coming and it's like, oh, I don't think so, and it's hard to make it fun for dogs. Anyway, that's another thing. But yes, absolutely, you've got to clean them. But the cat, it is difficult. Actually, it's more difficult because they've got
definitely
front claws. But on the other hand, being devil's advocate, I don't know, because I'm not a vet, so I've never worked in practice. But I've heard things, that sometimes vets would be having to do dentals, arguably sometimes when they weren't totally necessary?
I mean, it's difficult. The vet profession has changed a lot. Obviously we've got a lot more sort of, corporates and we know that there are targets out there. I don't personally know any vets who are recommending anything that isn't absolutely needed. That's my personal experience and my personal opinion. I think that there is, it's encouraged to be proactive, which is good. I think around some of the tests, there's kind of probably an abundance of caution sometimes. And so I think, again, it comes back to, if your vet recommends something, asking why, looking at the teeth, just sort of taking off some tartar, may not make that much difference. But if there's some gingivitis associated with that, if it's causing the gums to be sore, if it's causing the gums to retract, we know in ourselves that gingivitis, your gums are bleeding. It's not a good thing. So, if something's recommended, ask why. And the vet should be really happy to explain that to you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you've got to always ask why, definitely. I guess it's, demystifying a pet parent's concerns quite often as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. There isn't always a lot of time in a consultation, and the vet's often booked back to back. But you should still feel that if you're feeling, if you've got questions, it is important to ask them. The vets are not mind readers, but obviously when the conditions are more complex, when you're potentially faced with quite significant decisions about your pet's journey, you may want a second opinion, and that's what Pet Lighthouse is about. It's really giving you that time and space to explore what is important to you as an individual. And also, really importantly, which I don't think we talk about enough, is animal welfare is not just health. Animal welfare comprises your animal's health, but also their behavior, how they interact with their environment, how it's a balance of lots of different feelings, positive feelings, things that they enjoy, negative feelings, things that they don't. And it's really important that we look at that big picture, especially when we're facing big decisions about our pet's journey.
Yes, no, absolutely. And that's something, arguably, with these very short consultations at the vets, that does make it difficult, and also if you're seeing someone new that hadn't met your cat or whatever for the last 5 years before, that happens, then that's really difficult. I think it does trouble me, this big turnaround and seeing different people, because I do believe, tech or no tech, at the end of the day, people sell people. We haven't quite turned into robots yet. So for example, as Caroline, since in 2008 I was feeding a raw, balanced and complete diet then to Molly. And yes, we had the conversation, I'm sure. I can't remember specifically about that, but I'm sure it was covered. But, can you imagine, we're now in nearly, how many, 20 years later, crikey, I'm still having that same conversation. So every time I see a different vet, which is all the time at the moment, I have to explain that yet again, and it gets awfully tiresome, I'll be honest with you. Things like that. I know not everyone feeds a raw, balanced and complete diet, but more and more people are. So for example, there's that, and then, the other thing, often I again, it's this different vets. Actually, it's been okay. I haven't been asked to do a booster vaccine ever, actually. I think it's clear that I probably wouldn't want to, because, on the basis of what you did for Molly, and this is where you've really helped a pet parent. I was very nervous of Molly had her puppy shots, which, I think all puppies should have. But then, she got to the age of 6 and she hadn't had a booster. Do you remember? And then the practice you were with at the time, you were honestly ringing me up, actually, saying, look, Molly's got to have a booster shot. So we went in and we sat down, and I said, look, I'm just very nervous about it, Caroline, because I've been reading an article. I remember it was in Dogs Today magazine. And apparently the dog died the day after the booster shot. And so you're probably thinking, oh God, I've got a right one here. But you were brilliant. And guess what? Molly had probably one of the first ever titer tests. I didn't even know what a titer test was then. So you said, there is something you can do. I went, great. What? But you said, well, you'll probably have to buy the vaccines anyway. So you may as well just do the vaccines. And I said, no, let's do this test. And yeah, Moll's levels, do you remember? They were all high. So she didn't need to have a booster shot. So that was brilliant, you know, because you really helped me. That's what I wanted to have. And we proved it scientifically, and you know, it was brilliant. I think it did cost me quite a lot, but it was really worth it. And interestingly, it did prove what's now has been proved by the WSAVA, World Small Animal Veterinary Association, that the puppy shots can last a lifetime. So I know that's just an interesting thing, she says quite nervously.
No, I think it comes down to relationship, doesn't it? It comes down to the fact that you don't always have to agree. I mean, you know, Anna, you and I don't necessarily agree on you know, many things.
No,
I personally don't feed my dog raw food. I am concerned about, you know, the recent evidence around the kind of pathogenic bacteria that are in that, and the potential for the impact on human health as well. But I understand that a lot of people do, and I will have that conversation with them, and you know, make sure that they understand the implications. And I think it was the same with the booster. Now, I know that there's a lot of out there around, you know, vaccinations cause X, Y, and Z. You know, there's a lot of confusing causation, as it's actually cause with correlation, which is more of a coincidence. But you came with those concerns, which were very real to you. And I was able to see that there was an option for you. So we explored that. That was the titer testing, and that showed that Molly had good levels of antibody. It was more expensive than the vaccination. That means people may not choose to do it, but you wanted to do that. I think as well as the puppy vaccination, the 15-month one is really important. And my own dog does get her regular boosters, but you know, it is being able to have that relationship with your clients, and this has to be a two-way thing.
No.
You know, listening to concerns, listening to the evidence, and then, you know, making your decision with that kind of full awareness.
Yeah, no, totally, you know, but this was the thing, but this is why you're one of the three that really helped, you know, in my life so far. So, you know, which I'm so grateful for. And that's why, you know, we're still in conversation, to be honest. And again, very grateful for that moment. And I really do think, you know, Pet Lighthouse is exactly that. You know, it's a lighthouse, you know, it's offering a beacon, you know, to people who maybe are in a bit of a fog, a bit of a confusion. What do I do? And all I can say is heartfelt, genuinely, that to go to Caroline for her point of view, offering the help to guide you, would be definitely worthwhile. If anyone's listening that is in a situation where you're not sure, to look up Pet Lighthouse is what I would say, Caroline, genuinely.
I mean, thank you, Anna. You know, I really do appreciate that. But yeah, the reason it's called Pet Lighthouse is because it is about kind of, you know, trying to put a light through a fog, because these are often really difficult emotional decisions that people are facing. They may involve thinking about end of life. They don't have to be by any means. They could be at any point in a pet's life. But obviously, as vets, we have that privilege to perform euthanasia to ensure that animals don't suffer unnecessarily. But that is, you know, that can be a really difficult decision, you know, even for me as a vet. And trying to navigate that, you're dealing with, you know, anticipatory grief. So that's the feelings of grief before you actually have the loss. You're dealing with potentially a lot of kind of complicated, you know, medical considerations. There are often cost considerations that are really valid and important to consider. So there is a lot. And in Pet Lighthouse, it's about creating that space so that we can just spend time working through what is important to you, what's important to your pet, what are they trying to tell us about how they feel, to just bring light into what can be really difficult emotional situations that, frankly, keep you awake at night.
No, I know, absolutely. I mean, there is that, guilt. Am I not doing the right thing? No, I mean, in pre-anticipatory grief, gosh, little Mr. Binks, you've never met, you must meet him. He's 14 now, so, need I say any more? I mean,
Yeah.
he's okay, he's remarkable. He doesn't look 14, but it freaks me out. I wake up in the night, honestly, I was worried he died in the night the other night, so I had to wake him up and everything. That's bad, isn't it?
It's normal, unfortunately our pets don't live as long as we will. We are going, if we are regular pet parents, we are likely to experience several losses of our pets, and it's really tough. But it's about seeking support, obviously support from Pet Lighthouse, but also support from yourself through services like the Blue Cross Pet Loss support line. They can provide support in advance of a suspected sort of loss that you think might be coming down the line. They can provide support afterwards. They're a really excellent service. I've had some training from them, which was really excellent. So where you can plan, look for support, seek support, it's really important to do that, because they're members of the family, and it's tough.
Really tough, really tough.
Hey, Anna.
Hey, Mike.
So we've just finished Billy's first 60 days of Antinol, and wow, what a difference.
Really? Oh my gosh, what have you noticed?
Well, he's shiner. He's much more energetic. Not that he wasn't beforehand, but you can see the difference. But remember, I told you he used to have that little limp in his back left paw that he'd hurt himself when he was a pup. He
Yes,
doesn't
yes.
seem to do that much anymore.
What, the hop, skip, and the jump?
Yeah. So it's like his joints are a bit better. And we actually had friends around this weekend who'd noticed that there was something good about Billy. And I was telling them about Antinol, and they said, "Oh, what's in it?" I said, "Well, green lip muscle." And they said, "What's that?" And I go, "Oh, well, I don't know. I'll have to ask Anna," as I always do. So
Well,
for next time, what should I say? What's so great about green lip muscle?
Well, green lip mussel, it comes from New Zealand. It's the only place that green lip mussels live. And what's great about the green lip mussel is that it is what's known as a broad spectrum source of omega-3. And the reason dogs need to take omega-3 is that their bodies don't make it themselves. So unless they're getting it through, their diet, which can be omega-6 heavy. And it's very important to have a balance between omega-6 and omega-3. So it's normally through supplements that omega-3 is given. And green lip mussel is unique in its having everything from EPA, DHA, and ETA. So all the main omega-3s.
And how about Binks and Prudence? They must be much better as well.
Well, they've been on it for over a year, and they've been on green lip mussel forever since I've had them. So Prue's 10 now. So she's had green lip mussel since the first day I brought her home, to be honest, but not Antinol. And I only wish I'd discovered Antinol earlier. I really honestly mean that, because it's an oil rather than a powder. So its bioavailability, that means, its effectivity to get absorbed quickly and efficiently by the body is greater.
So people listening now and they want to discover Antinol for themselves, where do they go?
Well, all you have to do is go to Antinol, ANTINOL.co.uk, and then type in Anna Webb and get your special discount. So, Caroline, do you with Pet Lighthouse go to people's houses, and do a consult there, if you feel you need to meet the pet? And obviously, do you do the end of life bit?
So the consultations can be online. So that's obviously something that can be offered to people, in any location. I'm based in North London, so there are quite a wide number of London postcodes that I'll do home visits for. I actually don't treat or prescribe at all. That's quite a deliberate decision, and that includes actually performing the end of life, because I want to stay completely independent and provide support and advice. I don't want to interfere with, the relationship with the primary care vet is still really, really important. And I'm not seeking to take that over, but I'm seeking to help people have the space to work things through so they can go back to their vet clearer, empowered, knowing the questions to ask. So I don't prescribe or treat at all.
Oh, that's interesting. But it's good that, you are there, in the case of wanting to meet the pet and the owner. And I think a lot of it is about the human aspect. Would you agree?
I would agree. It's obviously how the person is feeling about the situation, about the things that are important to them. It can be something, I think about, a case of a diabetic animal. Diabetes can be, it can really affect your life. And if you've got to do injections twice a day, and but you've got your life, you might have kids, you've got all of these other things going on, and it's not selfish to say this has got to work with my life as well. So there's obviously finances, which we've all talked about, but lots of different personal circumstances. But also the owner is so important, because the animals can't talk for themselves. They can't tell us how they feel. So one of the aspects of Pet Lighthouse is going through a full welfare assessment through the questions I ask, to hear the voice of the animal through the answers that the owner gives me. So what are the kind of behaviors that you're seeing? What are the things that you're concerned about? That's almost like how the translation of trying to understand, if the pet could talk, what would they actually be saying about their circumstances, and what would they actually be saying about how they feel? Because they do have a lot of the same emotions and feelings, but they just can't express them in the same way. And they're often maybe different from what we might expect. They're not little humans for sure.
Oh, I know, that's one of the things I say a lot, actually. They're definitely not little people in a furry suit. But just going back, to your forms and the process, having been a client now, because you've helped a lot, actually. Thank you, Caroline, with Baggy to be the light through the fog. But the questions are brilliant. On your questionnaire, they're really done from the cat's point of view, and you've got a scale going on. So I can see that those questions are the right questions to ask to get the answers you need to know, to get a picture of the cat behaviorally as well as health-wise.
Yeah, I mean, they're based on animal welfare science. So there's something called the 5 domains model, which is an evolution. People may have heard of the 5 freedoms. It's an evolution of that enables us to look not just at avoiding negative things, which is what 5 freedoms did, but actually looking towards the opportunity for animals to experience positive emotions, which is really important. We all want to feel happy, so do our animals. But just obviously the science sits behind it, but you won't, hopefully when you have a conversation with Pet Lighthouse, you won't feel like it's a scientific endeavor, because I've tried to make it very relevant to the pet and the owner. But it does have that science sitting behind it, the 5 domains model.
Yeah, no, it does. And you've got an ebook as well, which I've downloaded, and that's free, for everyone to just download. And that's based again around the 5 domains, which is really interesting. So it didn't change that long ago. I mean, it was always the 5 freedoms. It's quite a new adaptation, isn't it, Caroline?
It's been around for quite a while now. It was work that was done in New Zealand, but it's just taken time to kind of work its way through the system, and especially things like different codes of conduct and guidance and all of this. It just takes time to become updated. So the 5 freedoms is definitely still out there, and I think really still probably in the farming world is still what people are talking about. But we do need to move on, because it's not good enough just to not do horrible things to animals. We actually really want them to have a good life. We want them to have a balance of positive experiences. We want them to be happy.
Well, yes, I mean, absolutely. And you can tell that so much, when you learn about the body language of, different in cats and dogs, which is something that's always a good thing to do as a pet parent, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that I'm very grateful for. My time at the RSPCA is working with some really amazing clinical animal behaviorists. And it's, I just learned so much from them about animal behavior, dog behavior, cat behavior, the differences. I think, you don't really get taught that very much as a vet. I think it's improved a bit, but it's a really important specialism. And it's also really important to, if you are having kind of behavioral problems with your animals, there's so much more that can be done now. There's so much better understanding. There's all the behavioral medications that we didn't have before. There's so much help that you can get, but the term behaviorist is not protected. And so there's a lot of kind of calling themselves behaviorists out there who are not properly trained and qualified. So it's really important to kind of explore and make sure that, they are belonging to the appropriate organization, and that they also really important, like only do the kind of positive training methods. So you might see balance trainers out there. That means that they use aversive techniques as well. And that is not good. No training should involve an animal experiencing negative feelings and fear. That just does not work out well for you in the end. And there's evidence, there's plenty of evidence of that. So you need to be looking up the CCAB, so that's the proper clinical animal behaviorists, if you do need that help.
Yes, and the CIDBT, the Cambridge Colin Tennant, and the lovely Ross McCarthy, who's a good friend of mine. They're great trainers, and yeah, absolutely to use positive. That's 100%. Battersea, I think, did a big study on the fact that through the pandemic, people were sadly, going online, and they were using a lot of aversive methods to no great success, obviously. You can give you a quick fix, maybe if your dog's jumping up and you want to knee them in the chest, might hold them back, but is it actually going to teach them anything? No. So you always want to have an alternative cue in place, and you teach 4 feet. So you praise the 4 feet on the ground. That's my trick anyway to it all. And then bit by bit, the dog will stop jumping up because it gets more attention for being 4 feet on the floor.
Yeah, quick fixes are always something that, you should be suspicious about, I'm afraid, in the behavior world. You need to spend a bit of time to actually, change the animal's thinking in a positive way. Quick fixes, particularly based on fear, just really have negative outcomes for the pet.
Yeah, 100%. And it doesn't really do your relationship any good, because you want your dog to love you.
Yeah, exactly.
Not be afraid, hate you. That would be awful. No, exactly. Gosh, Caroline. So summarize again for everyone, the Pet Lighthouse. It's a brand new service.
Yeah, I'm just excited to launch Pet Lighthouse. I think that it is something that's needed. That kind of safe space for pet owners to, to talk through the challenging journey that they're on with their pet, or when they've reached a kind of fork in the road, if they're struggling with, decision making, to have that space where we really focus on the animal's quality of life, their welfare, and their kind of family's own unique circumstances, and find a clear path forward for them.
Yes, thank you. I think that's great. I think lots of people listening will be getting in touch, Caroline. So thanks again for your time today, and we're going to be in touch. Hurrah!
Great. So so the website's petlighthouse.co.uk, and there's a lot more information on there, and it's all online booking. So great. Have a look.
All the links will be in the show notes. Don't worry. So that's all done. So Dr. Caroline Allen, amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That's our show, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go on, rate and review the show wherever you tune into your podcast. Thanks again, of course, to Dr. Caroline for joining us today. And all the links to the Pet Lighthouse are in the show notes. Thanks, of course, to Mike, my producer, for all the production and the music, as ever. If you're interested in finding out some more about Antinol and some more about NatuRaw, then simply go to my website, and in my Anna Recommends page, you can click through, find out more about both, and use my relevant discount codes. And of course, if you haven't already, then subscribe, because it's free, and that way you'll never miss another show. Bye for now.